Good and good evening, everyone. Welcome to MSBS Weekly Guided Meditation by Phra Goh. Today is the 11th of October 2022. We are again very grateful to have with us Bhante Adhibalo, popularly known as Phra Goh. He was born on July 14, 1985. Was ordained under the Thai Dhamma sect at Satipatthana Monastery, Johor in 2008. Bhante is currently the religious advisor to Buddhist Youth Network, Singapore. This week, we are continuing on the subject of Cacaka Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 148. Today's Bhante will be leading homage to Buddha and taking a 5 precepts for Buddhists. Now, let's compose our minds, put our palms together, and welcome Bhante. Over to you, Bhante.
Okay, thanks, Terence. Okay, so we start off with giving the Buddha 3 bows. First bow, second bow, and third bow. Okay, and then the opening chant, homage. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And the 3 refuges, Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. And the 5 precepts. Panatipada viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu miccācara viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musāvāda viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Suramiraya majjapamadatthana viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so good evening to everyone. So for those who are new, we're actually halfway through this topic. So in this Tuesday session, the topics are not pre-planned, as in there's no syllabus for it. It's all suggested by the participants here, right? So whoever suggests anything, then we'll just discuss them. So today, who suggested this? Upatissa, right? Yeah, so he's not here today. The person who suggested this topic isn't here. So normally you suggest, then I'll do my research and then we'll present. So we'll have like half an hour of discussion, followed by Q&A, then followed by practical guided meditation. Now, how does these teachings apply to meditation? So this is on the 6 sextets, basically it's on the 6 senses. So we've talked about how the senses, we know there are 6 of them, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And the sixth sextet, basically, there's another 6 processors. So 6 times 6, you get 36. Right, these are the 6 sextets. So what are the 6 processors? So we can move on the slide. So okay, yeah, so this is the first, they're talking about the summary of the 6 sextet next. Right, so the first sextet is on the all the organs, right? We talk about this, 6 senses. Second process is all the external object. Third process, the consciousness arising from the process. And the fourth process is the contact. Fifth process is the feeling that arises. And the sixth process is craving. So it is in this order. So basically it's a dependent arising of how craving comes about, how being, how this becoming, how this sense of self, how this ego comes to being. Okay, hi, Upatissa, you're here, we're talking about you. Okay, so we're talking about suggesting of topics and presenting on this first half an hour session. Okay, so where we covered? So we covered about the middle way, which is to practice detachment, so it requires reflection on this impermanence and non-self, right? Because the I is always changing, right? The how do you call it? Yeah, if the I organ is changing, is the sense of self associated with that I also changes. So that's basically the 2 points. And the third point is the conclusion. If it changes and your ego or your sense of self is also shaken, then that is not the true self. So that's for the organ. And likewise for all the processes, all the contact, all the external object, all the way to craving. Right? So all these processes we can investigate one by one and see whether are they truly self. Right? The sense of self is, we call this like as though, it is with us for so long, it's like pre-programmed. It's our natural assumption that the sense of self is real. We treat the I am I, correct? So the I is like very real, but there is a condition to cause that I to arise. So now this is the teaching on how to sort of break down this self. Right? It's because of a self, then this self goes through suffering, or this self experiences birth, aging, sickness, death. And if a person becomes selfless or achieve this non-self, then who is experiencing birth, aging, sickness, and death? Right. So this is the Buddhist middle way. It's not to adjust the pain or adjust the pleasure to moderate level. No, it's about transcending. Transcending the both pain and pleasure. Okay, so the same thing for, and it's a conclusion for the 6 processes. Next. So this is the reflection on the other sense doors, your ear, the nose, tongue, body, and mind. Same thing, there are 6 processes associated with all these senses. So altogether there are 36 sextet. Okay, next. Okay, so we've talked about this, I think, the previous session. How does this sense of becoming, sense of I, sense of ego appear? It is following through, blindly following the sheep, or blindly following the processes, and taking things at face level. Right, so once we see something, hear something, or whatever, right, and all the way there's craving. Naturally, when we see something nice, then there will be pleasant feelings. So we will respond with greed. If we see something unpleasant, then we'll respond with aversion, hatred, which is craving. So that's the 6th process. So the first 5 is more or less like a reflex, and the 6th step is more like our man-made suffering, our own, how do you call this, man-made response. Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, so same thing for all the senses. Whatever we see, hear, smell, think, taste, and touch, we feel that we are the one that experiencing. This is my experience. This is my vision, or my hearing, my smell. This is what I want, what I like. Right. So this is how the sense of self appear after that. So in sort of Buddhist psychology, this craving and becoming comes after, the sense of self comes after craving. Once we cling on to this experience, then the becoming appears. Whereas most of, if I'm not wrong, Western psychology, they believe it is a sense of self first that makes the decision. Yeah, so it's like very different. Yeah? It's opposite way. Okay, next. Okay, then now we talk about this middle path, which is how to practice this non-self, which we covered earlier, the 3 questions we asked, right? We observe the impermanence first, the first step, and second step is the sense of self arising and falling also with that organ, or with that any of the mental cognitive processes. And eventually, if it changes, then that is not the true self, that is not you. So that's how we come to the conclusion. Okay, so all these are the 6 processes. We talked about it earlier. So this is called the middle way, middle path. Right? So middle path is not 50% of both greed and hatred, but transcending. Yeah, using this reflection, reduce craving, reduce, and then eventually transcending. Okay, next. So same with all the sense organs. I think we talked about this already. Okay, so today we are covering this dependent arising. Right, so all the while we are talking about dependent arising. So dependent arising means you depend on a previous condition for this thing to appear. And after this thing appear, then it's like a chain reaction. It causes another thing to appear. So they're all interconnected, interrelated. It's a bit like like a deck of cards. Yeah, and so you push one down, then all the cards will follow, and it's a domino effect. Yeah, so that's the word I'm using. Okay, domino effect. Okay, so I'm going to read through this particular verse. So we'll comment along the way. Dependent on the eye and forms, there arises consciousness at the eye. Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward process. Who is still not clear at this point? All clear? Okay. Then the next process after consciousness is contact. Yeah? The meeting of the 3 is contact. So one good example we normally like to use is all the while, for example, our eyes are there, our ears are there, the nose, tongue, body, and mind. So all our organs are there all the time. Our senses are working. We can see, we can smell, and so on. But do we experience all the senses together all the time? For example, let me direct your attention. Now you're hearing my voice, right, my sound. But now I ask you to feel your heartbeat. Can you feel your heartbeat? But before I ask you to feel your heartbeat, do you feel your heartbeat? Huh? So if you didn't feel a heartbeat, does that mean your heart is not beating? Your heart is beating all the while, right? But just that your attention is not there. So the sort of the fixation of the attention is called contact. Yeah, because we pay attention to one thing at one time or something like that. Yeah, even though some people think they may multitask, it's a very fast jumping of attention. That's all. So it's many kinds of contact at very fast intervals. So we are not sort of all-knowing, all omnipresent, omniscient all the time. Yeah. So the mind works. It's like you overload. So we pay attention to one thing at one time, right? So the meeting of these three things is contact. All right, and with contact as a requisite condition, there arises what is felt either as pleasure, pain, and neither pleasure or pain. So this is feeling, right? So feeling, there are three kinds of feeling: pleasure, pain, and neutral. So they call it neither pleasure nor pain, which is neutral. Okay, so so this is the response to each feeling. If when touched by a feeling of pleasure, if one relishes it, welcomes it, or remains fastened to it, then one's passion obsession gets obsessed. So this the 3 points is talking about craving. So the first point talks about greed. If you have pleasant feeling, pleasure feeling, then it will respond with greed. And the second one, if when touched by a feeling of pain, one sorrows, grieves, and laments, beats one breast, become distraught, then one resistance, obsession gets obsessed. So the resistance is aversion. So that's a second kind of craving. And the third point, when touched by a feeling of neither pleasure nor pain, one does not discern as it comes to be the origination, passing away, allure, drawback, and the escape from the feeling, then one's ignorance obsession gets obsessed. So if one has neutral feeling and one doesn't practice right reflection, doesn't put in right effort to think of wholesome thoughts, then one will cling on to the neutral feeling. So one will remain in the status quo. So in the previous sessions, we talked about the 3 kinds of cravings in the first discourse of the Buddha, Bhavatanha, which is craving for this eternalism. Craving for eternalism. So delusion is something like that. So if a person is enjoying sort of what they are at now presently, then they may have this delusion: I want to live forever, I want to be healthy forever, I want all this kind of stuff, right? So this is a kind of delusion. So normally in practice we break these 3 kinds of craving. So like for impermanence, it breaks number 1 and 3. When we think of impermanence, it reduces greed, and it also reduces this delusion. So for number 3, it mentions if a person doesn't observe origination and passing away, which is impermanence, then one will be deluded. So when we reflect on impermanence, one reduces greed and also one reduces delusion. So that's 2 in 1. And for the second one, which is resistance kind of craving, aversion, we use loving kindness to overcome this craving. So these are the 3 sort of poisons or 3 kinds of craving. Okay, next. Okay, that a person without abandoning passion, obsession with regard to a feeling of pleasure, without abolishing resistance, obsession with regard to feeling of pain, without uprooting ignorance, obsession with regard to a feeling of neither pleasure nor pain, without abandoning ignorance and giving rise to clear knowing, would put an end to suffering and stress in the here and now. Such a thing isn't possible. Right, so a person needs to give up this craving. one is to abandon craving. So if as long as a person still craves or addicted to craving, then it's hard to end suffering. So again, we talk about there are many ways to solve problems in life. So there are mundane solutions. So let's say if a person is sick, then you can see a doctor. So that's a mundane solution. But if a person, let's say, has various issues, maybe they have some furniture problem, then they can repair with a toolkit, example. So these are mundane solutions. So if you talk about internal problems, internal issues, what's our expectation to curing the illness? Or what's the expectation of solving all these external issues? So that is the internal problem. So for Buddhism, we're actually more focused on solving the internal problem, the spiritual problem. So ending of suffering and stress with regard to craving and expectation. Okay, so same with the ear, nose, tongue, body, and intellect, right? As long as there's a reaction with greed, hatred, or delusion to any of our experiences, any of the sense doors, any contact, then it is actually feeding the sense of self, feeding craving, feeding this ego. All right, so ego is dependent on all this. Okay, next. Okay, so the reverse order is basically like the solution. So it's actually very repetitive, right? We talked about the three kinds of reflections. We talked about the middle way. So now this is another way to put it. The reverse order of dependent origination, not the full reverse order, but I just label it as reverse order. Okay, dependent on the I and forms, there arises consciousness and the I. So the same, you can't do anything about it. It is not removing of the I to solve the problem. No, let's say a person injure themselves or they try to harm themselves just to solve suffering. That's not the way. You can remove all the organs, but the brain is still there. You still can think. There's still an intellect door, and all the craving will be intensified over one door. Okay, the meeting of the three is contact. Still the same process. You can't do anything about it. That's a reflex action. With contact as a requisite condition, there arises what is felt as either pleasure, pain, or neither pleasure nor pain. So, up to feeling, this is also a reflex action. So sometimes people have misconception or stereotype. They think enlightened beings, no pain. You look at Buddha statue, we sit there like 24 hours not moving, put on a smiling face. Okay, enlightenment means no pain. No, so there is pain. There is pain. So how does a person practice to overcome mental anguish? So the first one, if when touched by a feeling of pleasure, one does not relish it, welcome it, or remain fastened to it, then one's passion obsession doesn't get obsessed. Okay, so basically it's the opposite of the previous slides. So the previous one talked about if there's a pleasure feeling, one welcomes it, one clings to it. Whereas this one, if there's a pleasant feeling, one doesn't have greed towards this pleasant feeling. So this is the first one. So very easy to say, I don't have greed, Lord. So there is a methodology. So the back to basics, the foundation to right thought. The definition of right thought. Thoughts are non-greed, thoughts are non-hatred, thoughts are non-delusion. So thoughts of non-greed will be like things like generosity. So for our case, we're using impermanence. And thoughts of non-hatred will be loving kindness. and thoughts of non-delusion, wisdom, which is also impermanence. Okay, so now we go to the second point. When touched by a feeling of pain, one does not sorrow, grieve, or lament. Beat one's breast or become distraught, then one's resistant obsession does not get obsessed. So again, this is like discussing the end point. One does not feel sorrow. So this is more like an enlightened being's talk. Yeah. So enlightened being, they won't feel this mental sorrow. Yeah? One does not grieve over this pain. So if one does not resist, that means one uses loving kindness. So from the ground up approach, we practice this loving kindness. Okay, and number 3, when touched by a feeling of neither pleasure nor pain, one discerns as it comes to be origination, passing away, allure, drawback, escape from that feeling. Then one's ignorance, obsession doesn't get obsessed. So at least the third point, they talk about the practical step, which is to observe the origination and passing away. Yeah? So one needs to discern, one needs to reflect on the drawback and get disenchanted with any of those feelings. Okay, so these are the 3 kinds of feelings and the 3 kinds of responses. Okay, next. That a person, through abandoning passion, obsession with regard to a feeling of pleasure, through abolishing resistance, obsession with regard to feeling of pain, through uprooting ignorance, obsession with regard to a feeling of neither pleasure nor pain, through abandoning ignorance and giving rise to clear knowledge, would put an end to suffering and stress. In the here and now, such a thing is possible. So the key word is put an end to suffering and stress in the here and now. Yeah? So if a person were to consistently practice, always mindful of how one reacts to these 3 kinds of feeling, with the correct kind of reflection, one can overcome suffering here and now. So when I talk about here and now, does that mean one physically does not get old? Does that mean one does not go through death? Or does that mean one physically does not get sick? No, one still physically goes through those things. One physically feels pleasure, pain, and so on. But mentally, one overcomes the suffering and stress. So that's the meaning. All right. So you don't have to wait till next lifetime. So this one can be done here and now. Okay, so dependent on ear and sounds, dependent on nose and aromas, dependent on tongue and flavors, dependent on body and tactile sensations, dependent on intellect and ideas. So this dependent arising consciousness all the way to feeling is the moment-to-moment practical method. Yeah, it's not about 3 lifetime. Yeah, so the 3 lifetime is more like post-canonical kind of ideology based on the off-tangent interpretation of this rebirth linking consciousness. Okay, next. Is there a next slide? Wow, okay, so looks like we are finishing. So this is the last slide. Okay, disenchanted through this passion. He is released. With release, there's the knowledge released. He discerns that birth is ended. Right, the holy life fulfilled. The task done. There is no further, nothing further for this world. That's what the Blessed One said. Gratified, the monks delighted at his words. And while this explanation was being given, the hearts of 60 monks, through lack of clinging, were released from affluence. So after this sermon, 60 monks got enlightened. So after this talk, how many of you get enlightened? Okay, so it's a very different situation. Okay, so So the interesting thing here, it mentions, right? Birth is ended, right? So becoming and birth is ended. So it's not about seeing future lives. Some people may take it seeing future lives. So, but this one down here, like in our meditation sessions, if a person gets absorbed in your mental creation, in your mind drama, so you make up stories in the mind, and if you get sort of born into that story, then you feel the ups and downs, the vicissitudes of that story, all the birth, aging, sickness, and death in that story, all the dramas of the story, all the happiness and pain in that story, right? So that is a kind of birth. So it's not the physical kind of birth, right? So normally in most of the scripture where the monks got enlightened and where they make this statement, no, release, he listens, birth is ended. So normally the enlightened monks in that scripture will declare birth is ended. Does that mean all those monks can see all their past and future lives? No, so there are instances those monks don't have ability to see all the past and future lives. So, so when a person is talking about dependent, arising, kind of this moment-to-moment practice, they're talking about this birth in terms of how do you call it? Arising from the becoming, when there's a sense of self, a sense of ego appearing, so that is a kind of birth also. Okay, so I'm ending this presentation and I'm going to open the floor to Q&A, and at the same time you all can brainstorm for the next session's topic, for me to present something, if not nothing to present. Okay, so yeah, any questions or any suggestions? Anything you wish to discuss in the next session? Or any questions from the presentation earlier who is confused? Yes, Ubertisa, you have something.
Thanks very much, Bante, for the presentation. If you go back to slide 24 just now.
Okay, so we need Terence to go back to slide 24. Is it this one?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
It says, without abandoning passion, obsession with regard to feeling of pleasure, and also, without abolishing resistant obsession with regard to feeling of pain.
Okay, all right.
Without uprooting ignorance obsession with regard to feeling of neither pleasure nor pain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I think out of the three, out of pleasure, pain, and neutral feelings, the first two is probably much more obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
The last one is neutral feelings. It's not obvious even to realize that there is neutral feeling at all. I mean, by definition of neutral feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, okay, that's right. So for greed, very obvious, there's a feeling of pulling you want, right? So that's greed. So hatred is more like pushing. So
Yes.
neutral feeling is a bit like idling. It's not pushing or pulling. So it's like doing nothing. So sometimes in meditation, some people may think meditation means do nothing, sit there, do nothing. Meditation should be relaxed, or sit there and do nothing. So that is clinging to neutral feeling, right? So that's the problem. So there's a reason why it is called mental cultivation or mental training. So you need to train. So some effort is required. So if a person do nothing, that's basically what we do before we sleep. And before we sleep, we lie there and do nothing. Then we fall asleep. So in meditation, for those who sit there and do nothing, probably they're sleeping, sitting and sleeping. So that is a neutral feeling. So there's a delusion. So if they sit there, do nothing, then they come out, what did they learn? What did they learn from meditation? Then they probably they tell nothing also. So that's a kind of delusion. Yeah, so, and of course, ignorance is the last fetter, very hard to remove. So only an enlightened being can remove ignorance. So in a way, you're correct. That's the last step. Only an arahant can overcome ignorance. So the first two, supposedly much easier. So at least up till non-returner, right? Then one removes greed and anger completely. So before that, you still can get angry, still get greedy, still very normal. Still need to practice more. All right. Anything else? No questions. All enlightened. Okay, so we can go for a 5-minute break if there's no questions. So do come up with suggestions for next week also. So I'll see you back in 5 minutes time for the guided session. Okay, see you later. So you turn on the mic, make sure your back is upright and the rest of the body relax. Yeah, so we start off with more or less like the same routine, a bit of visualization, learning to detach from the body. So we're going to think of the hairs, and we wish all the hairs well and happy. Okay, so if let's say we don't have the right thought, we just think of the hairs. And when we think of hairs, naturally the mind will due to our defilements and habits, will tend to cling to either greed or hatred. So if there's a nice feeling of the hair, or my hair looks very nice, very beautiful, then naturally there will be greed. Or if let's say I don't like my hair, the hair so ugly, I don't like the fashion, or whatever it is, then the mind will develop aversion. And if it's a neutral feeling, then you'll be just like that, no? And there's no learning. So these are the three kinds of feelings. So the first thing we're going to do is first have thoughts of loving kindness. So whenever we think of a new patch of hair, we wish it well and happy. So a new frame, a new image arise, we wish it well and happy. We are using the mind sense door, mind door consciousness. The eyes are closed, so whatever's happening, it's within the mind. And we can also observe the state of mind or the emotions. The more we sort of wish it well and happy. And interestingly, that is also a kind of craving. You produce a new emotion, and when we cling to this more wholesome kind of emotion, it will produce another sense of self, a different kind of self. So that's why we always say you're a kind being, you're a courageous being, or you're a selfish being. So the state of mind will produce a kind of personality. Yeah, so when the mind is sort of calm, then you have slightly non-aversion personality. And now we're going to reflect on impermanence. So all these hairs go through birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So you think of them growing and falling, many cycles. So when you think of them growing and falling, the whole idea is not to go into any dramas, any speculation, and not to create any further story, but focus on the process and the six sextet earlier on, from the mind door all the way to contact and feeling when these images are produced. So the emphasis is on the 6 processes. See how these 6 processes arise and pass away. If it is too complicated, then just think of the hairs of the hairs arising and passing. So when our attention is at the image, there's contact, there is the consciousness is there. So the 5 aggregates are there. So again, back to basics. And we can just observe the impermanence of the 5 aggregates. And we can ask ourselves, are these hairs truly self? Can we tell the hairs not to go through this birth and death? In the next part of the body, we're going to think of the nails, fingernails and toenails. And we first wish them well and happy. So when the mind thinks of a new object, then you can observe, the sense of self, is it re-solidifying again after the detachment with impermanence? So to soften the self, we use loving kindness. Wish all the nails well and happy. We are not training the nails, we are training this mind to eventually detach. Okay, and once you find your mind relatively calm, and your calm down version personality, and then we can reflect on impermanence. All these nails go through birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So you can think of them growing and falling, many cycles. And we can observe these 6 processes or your 5 aggregates, how it arise and pass away. And we can ask ourselves, are these nails truly self? Can we tell the nails not to go through this birth and death? And next we are going to think of the teeth. We wish all the teeth well and happy. Upper rows of teeth, lower rows of teeth, may they be well and happy. Then we can observe this becoming, or this sense of self throughout the process of the meditation, how it changes, how it transforms in various reflections. So when this sort of sense of self changes, and which is the true self? Okay, and all these teeth go through birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So they keep growing and falling, growing and falling. You can think of this process, many cycles, even though the teeth fall off twice only. You just keep repeating. It's just a mental detachment exercise. And you can observe the impermanence of the 6 processes or the 5 aggregates. Anything can be subject to clinging, huh? Any emotion, any sensation. So impermanence is the non-stick technology. we can ask ourselves, yeah? So my question is more or less like the 3 points mentioned in the presentation. First is we observe the impermanence. Second is the sense of self changing when you observe impermanence, when you reflect on impermanence. And when it changes, is there even a self? Is there a true self? Okay, next we move on to the skin of the entire body. We wish them well and happy. All the skin are subject to birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So you think of them growing and falling, many, many cycles. And we observe the impermanence of the 6 processes or the 5 aggregates. Okay, then we can go through the 3 points. First point is the impermanence of the processes, and second point is if there's like a detachment, will the sense of self be the same or is it changing? And the third point would be, and which is the true self? Is the self real? Okay, then now we are going to change the routine. We are not going to visualize. We are using now the body sense door, so we are not visualizing, we are feeling sensations. Yeah, so throughout the entire body, whatever sensation that appear, we wish them well and happy. So the sensations can be classified as the four elements. So now we're mindful of the four elements of the body. So earth represents any hard and soft sensations. The fire element represents any hot and cold sensations. Wind element represents any fast and slow movements. And water element represents any moisture, moist or dry. So basically whatever sensation that appear, no need to purposely create them. Let it appear naturally by itself, and whatever appears, you just make peace with them, wish them well and happy. So the whole idea is repetition, right effort, right thought, new sensation appear, well and happy. Once we idle and do nothing, then the mind will naturally cling on the next obvious sensation, and it will drift away. So all these sensations, again, like same analogy, would be like all the waves in the ocean. It will just drag our boat here and there all over the place, and the right reflection, wishing the sensations well and happy, is a bit like rowing the boat. So at least we have a direction, we are rowing it to a certain direction. So regardless of the storm, yeah, is it stormy or calm, we keep rowing the boat, wishing all these sensations well and happy. If the mind is relatively calm, then we are going to take note of this baseline emotion. No insight, no concentration yet, just pleasant sense of emotion. So later on, when we progress, if there's any concentration, there should be an increment in the positive emotions. So now we treat this as a baseline. Okay, now we are going to wish all beings in all directions well and happy, above, below, and all across. No need to push or force the mind anywhere. Let it extend naturally by itself. It's just a gentle wish, and no need to visualize how all sentient beings look like. When the mind extends, it will naturally encompass all beings along the way, and we can perceive all beings as the elements. All beings are made of these elements and the aggregates. So whatever sensation we detect, and they also more or less detect something like that. So when we detect any sensation appearing, we wish all beings well and happy. So it doesn't matter near or far, large or small area. You detect some sensation appearing, then you wish all beings well and happy. So this time the wish is to all beings, not just yourself. So new sensation appear, all beings well and happy. New sensation appear, all beings well and happy. By doing this, we are reducing the drama. Once you start to visualize certain person or certain nationalities, certain species, then we'll start to think of how's our encounter with them, the memories of the past, lots of dramas, then lots of birth and being. So we use the non-discriminative approach, boundless loving kindness, all beings, same treatment, made of elements. Okay, so the continuous wishing of all beings well and happy may lead to the first level of concentration, denoted by joy, happiness, and a deeper sense of peace compared to the baseline emotion. And again, regardless of what you experience, continue to wish all beings well and happy. Because even concentration also subject to clinging. Once you idle and enjoy the whatever pleasant sensation it is, then that's it. Clinging to a pleasant feeling. So continue to row the boat, wish all beings well and happy. Okay, now we're going to add some insight or some wisdom to the reflection. We're going to think how to cultivate a more boundless loving kindness or more unconditioned loving kindness. So we're going to shake away some attachments. So we're going to reflect on impermanence, all the sensations, all beings arise and pass away every moment. So besides observing the changes in the sensations, you can use whatever labeling you want to repeat like a mantra. You can use change, impermanence, rising and passing, inconstant, right? Whichever label are comfortable, just keep repeating. Okay, so the combination of this loving kindness and insight may lead to the fourth level of concentration, which is denoted by the emotion of equanimity. So there's no more joy, no more happiness, all the pleasant thing like disappear. So it's a neutral but uplifting kind of emotion. And regardless of what you experience, continue to reflect on impermanence. So in Buddhism, the right concentration in the Noble Eightfold Path is defined as the 4 jhanas. So we just did like number 1 and number 4 only. So the fourth being this equanimity is used to purify this mindfulness, make the mind sort of neutral and objective, not easily shaken later on. But again, this will wear out over time. Okay, so we are going to now bring the attention back to the body. No need to expand the mind. So when we come back, we can feel the various sensations around the body. And now we are going to let the mind freestyle. So now we up the difficulty level. So when it freestyle means your attention can jump around all the senses. So when we freestyle, it's a bit like playing catching. So there's no need to deliberately fixate the mind anywhere, no interfering with its thinking process. Let it roam around freely. Wherever it wants to run, let it run. The only thing we're doing is observe how this attention arise and pass away. So remember the 6 processes from your sense organ. Number 1, number 2 is external object. Number 3 is the sense consciousness arising, the awareness. And number 4 is the contact, which is the attention. And number 5 is the feelings. And number 6, whether there's craving, depending on your reflection. So at least these are the processes you need to look out for every moment. So for example, if I'm speaking, most probably your attention is to my sound. If I stop speaking, where is your attention now? So the same thing, we use the mantra of impermanence, keep repeating whatever label of impermanence you want to use it. So basically we are practicing detachment in all modes of mental cognitive processes, be it fixated, expanded, freestyle. We still can practice, and there's no excuse to say no time to practice meditation. And before we conclude the session, same gentle reminder, we can be mindful of impermanence in all postures, standing, sitting, walking, or lying down. And with that, we can gently open our eyes. Okay, so we formally end the session, but informally still can generate right thought. Right, anyone has any problems or questions? No, nothing, all good? Okay, then can do the closing chant. Okay, so this is dedication of merits. Akasata Japumata Devanaga Mahitika Punyang Tang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Loka Sasanang Etavata Cha Amhihi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Sabbe Bhuta Sabbe Sata Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya. And dedication of merits to departed Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. And aspiration. Imina punya kamina mame bara samagamo satang samagamo hotu yavani bana patiya sadhu sadhu sadhu. Okay, so that's the end for tonight. Next week we're starting a new topic. Any announcements from Terence? Okay, if not, then good night everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Bante.
night, Bante.
Good night,
Thank you,
brothers
Bante.
and sisters.
Thank you.
Good Bante.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Bye Bante.
Good night.